stood out on that road at the observation point watching that column go up over the hill, I probably haven't had a lower moment in my career. You know, my first thoughts were, you know, are you going to get fired? Do you even want to be a burn boss anymore? You have so many successes that pretty soon you're thinking you can pull off anything. We had done about 10 years of successes, and you get rolling on it, and you think you can do it all. And anytime you have that much success, you start picking smaller and smaller bullseyes, and that's what we did here. You know, our window was really little to have success here. So what does anything like a wind change do? It just makes the window that much smaller to the point where you can't get through it. So we get started 7:30ish, and everything's going fine. It's not a big deal. They get to about here, and the helicopter's been making a few strips. It's not really pulling together because it's still pretty cold. You know, flame length is 6 to 12 inches, just really not getting very good effects, but we're giving it a try. They got to about here, and they got some fire into a snag that started burning, and it spit some spots over into an old punky log right next to the lines. They picked up a few spots there. They held up for about 10 or 15 minutes there. But about the same time, I get a call from the southern unit down on the other end. They tell me, hey, we're getting the wind switch down here. South-southwest now. I'm like, what? You know, doesn't make sense because I'm still getting it out of the northeast here. I stayed for the most part at this spot I call the observation point. Let me show you what that looks like. This is a big main dirt road. It's called the 108 or Loop Road, and this is that little road that ties in and around. This is a little piece of private land. But you can see that the grasses and dirt are kind of sparse out here. It's heavily grazed. You can't run through fire through there if you wanted to. And everything on the other side of this road is fairly non-receptive. But they're right in this area right here, and I get the spots. But you know, talking to the southern unit, they're you know, they tell me, yeah, we're getting winds here. It's been happening for about the last 10, 15, 20 minutes. They're sustained. You know, they're not real brisk or anything, but they're sustained winds out of the south-southwest. So what do? You change tactics, right? You got fire. You know, they got fire on the bottom end here. We got to get the black line around the top end. So they change tactics, move their group, and they continue firing. Meanwhile, the helicopter's painting in the middle. So not a big deal. Still fire behavior's on the cool side, so not really much going on. By about 11:30, you'll see this little spot called wind shift location. That was my firing boss. Calls me and says, hey, I'm getting south-southwest winds on me now. And I was starting to about the observation point. About the time he calls me, I'm starting to feel it too. It's like I just happened to notice it. That's, you know, not coming out of where it's supposed to come. So what do? We call the National Weather Service right there. We get on the cell phone. Say, hey, what's the deal? getting a south-southwest wind. And they say, I don't know, we'll change your spot for you. Okay, go ahead and change the spot then. But you got what you got then, right? You got south-southwest winds. So I don't, there's no mistaking it. It's there. So at that point, we gather up the troops. I tell them to find a soft little ridge line. You can kind of see in this, the lighting's somewhat poor, but you can see these are little ridge lines that fall off here through the unit. So I told them to find a little soft ridge line in there and hang it up. Leave your fire where it's going to have to back down the hill, whatever. And they do. They hang it up right here, and it never moves again the rest of the day from that spot. So I gather them up. We get some vehicles into them, and we've got fire sprung all through here. So it's probably about to here on this road. This road goes all the way up to Bixler Saddle. So we got fire to here. So now the plan is to pick it up right here, drag our black line around, all the way around, just change directions. Typical stuff. That's what happens. But still, now we're getting a little bit better fire activity, but not much. About this time I get, we're slinging weather every half hour. I got a person slinging weather on this portion, and then one person swinging weather on the south portion, which is about 3 miles to the south. So the north portion, he tells me I've got humidities at 9%. I say, okay, about the same time the other guy calls in. He's still got humidities in the 15, 16 range. So in my mind, what's the humidity? 15, 16. Yeah, because we're going for it. We're already committed here. So that's what you go. The guy's telling me my select parameters. I think it's off. It's brand new. Something. I'm like, yeah, it's off. Go find another one. It's got to be still 15, 16. Still not getting real good fire behavior. In fact, where we picked it up. This is midday. I'll show you a picture of the fire effects through here in the middle of the day, so you can see it. Okay, it's kind of hard to tell, but you can kind of see nothing red needled, nothing, climbing trees. You can see little bushes in here that are still intact. Real low intensity ground fire through here. This is midday, noon, supposedly with 9% RH. So, it's actually on the cool side. We want to get some red needles in here. It's just not happening. It's a little on the docile side, but so we keep going. We've got fire all the way out in the middle of the thing now, so we've kind of committed at this point. So by about 12:30, 1300, I go drive back down to the south unit, and they're about finished up. They've got a little bit of helicopter work to do interior, but they're about done. They never have one issue, never get one spot. Went down there and checked them out, chat with those guys. Came back up the road, and came to this spot I call the Forest Service 45 Road and Dozer Junction. Okay, this is, like I said, this is the 45 road, goes all the way up to a place called Bixler Saddle, way up on the west slope of Bill Williams Mountain. And then this is Dozer line that takes all the way around and loops back into this main road. Okay, it's the main road, the observation point that I was at earlier. So I went up here to chit-chat with these guys, and as I drove down this little road here, from about 2-3 chains in, this had all been thinned heavily, piled and burned. There was very little fuel in there. They tried to force some fire in there. It burned the needles off, and it was actually cold when I came through. So 2-3 chains of cold, smoking a little bit, right through here. But the rest of this wasn't really, there's not a whole lot of activity, not putting up a whole lot of smoke. I get to here, and I'm talking to a dozer operator and an engine captain and one of the crew bosses off one of the crews. And right about that time, we get some some pinyon pine that goes off. It's some bug kill. Gets in some of that, spits some black smoke, torches a couple of things out, just right here. And it throws some spots over into this area. What this is all a bunch of scrub oak in there, which doesn't really burn very well in that country this time of year. So the crew's in there trying to pick them up, and they're all, $50 size spots. They just don't grow. There's nothing running off, anything like that. They just want the dozer in there to make sure they pick them all up. So we do. We send the dozer in there to just kind of make a loop around that little area. Not a big deal. About that time, I'm talking to the helicopter, and the person doing the aerial firing at the time is my assistant, my full year-round assistant. So he's doing the firing, so I ask him why I don't have much smoke coming up over here, in this interior area. Do I got fire in there? And he says, yeah, I ran some balls in there, but it's in some dead and down bug kill, and it's just not creeping through there very well. Well, I'm like, all right, well, how about if we put a little bit more fire in there? That's what I tell him. And he's like, we'll just leave it alone for now. I think it'll eventually get through there. And if you ever met the guy, he's really quiet, but you'll get to know that he has a lot of wisdom, usually, for being such a young guy. He's caught me so many times. He's always right, and it seems like I'm always wrong. But I asked him again, hey, let's move it along. Put a little fire in here. And let's try to get along here. He says, I really think it'll be all right. But what happens? He gets into good soldiering, right? It's like, all right, you asked me 3 times, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. So he does. He runs another little strip of balls in here, kind of a half moon type pattern there. And then he flies back down to the south room to check on something they needed to check on. Not a big deal. So I'm still standing there and talking to these guys. Maybe 10, 15 minutes pass. And I turn back around where I asked him to put the balls. Now I've got a column built in there. So now I'm looking at it going, what the heck, I had nothing in there a minute ago. I couldn't put together that, one little strip is going to do that much more. And I've seen it done. I've been in the back of helicopters for many, many years. And I've seen the same thing done, but it wasn't registering to me on the ground. So he comes back with the helicopter and asks him, okay, I got a little column built over there, what's going on? He says, where I put all those balls in that bug kill, now all those balls have come together and you got a mass ignition in that little spot in there. I say, oh great. He says, I'm going back for fuel, we'll see you later. Oh, okay. So I get in my truck and I drive down the road and I get to about this point right here. When I get to that point, it's jet black, dark as night. Columns bent over the road and you can't see 20 feet in front of the truck. Look over and I've got a little string of fire I can see and numerous spots out in this country. So I'm like, all right. So back to the firing guys. They're still right here. And once again, I ask them, hey, find the other edge of that soft little ridge line coming off and hang it up in there until we get back to you. And they do. Find a little spot and it doesn't move off from there. So the rest of the day, we work at, that's about 2:30 in the afternoon. And we work at trying to get a handle on all this, okay? By about 18:30 that evening, we had everything lined. It ended up being about 25 acres Slopover, okay? But what I started noticing is the fuels were starting to get a lot heavier as further and further you got off the road. And even up in here, I started running into piles. Some hand piles, 10, 12 foot hand piles, small dozer piles, and I didn't know those were there. But they go off like bombs at 9% humidity. And you get one and then it spits a bunch of spots out in something else, and that was kind of our issue. But nothing was running out, and most of this 25 acres is in direct line, picking it up with the dozer and then burning it off as we go. So, there's just a lot of little plenty spots, nothing running off. It's just nuisance stuff. But, we checked up our burn, and by 18:30 we had everything that we knew of lined. And then gridded for another 2 hours. So then by 20:30 we pulled everyone off the line and went home. Not a big deal. So we reorganized. I have a holding boss on the Slopover, a holding boss for the main portion of what we got to burn left. And I was going to give that person a couple of engines and a squad from the hand crew. So that day, we upped our staffing a little bit. We found some more people in and around Williams there. We were up to 96 personnel, 2 Type 3 dozers, 7 engines, 2 water tenders, and 2 helicopters. So we wanted, just that extra, that other helicopter wasn't on scene yet. It was still at the Grand Canyon, but we wanted to make sure it was available in case we got some more work we needed to have some buckets put on it. So that was the plan. I had the holding specialist come in about 6 o'clock that morning and just to come out here and make sure we picked everything up. So he gets out there at 6 and he calls me about 6:30. And right about here, he finds there's a 1/4 acre spot and a 3/4 acre spot. So 2 spots, can loop them all together, but it's really tough digging, even for the Type 3 dozers. Boulders start to get into some of these little drainages. Some of these boulders in there are this tall, with big, heavy, old logs in there. Just real heavy fuel. Tough digging. So I give him a couple of engines, a dozer, some folks off the hand crew, and they start working. Not a big deal. The rest of us go to the briefing, and then our plan is to pick it back up right here at the where we left off that evening. So we gather up there and we get started. It seemed like it was kind of late, 8:30, 9 o'clock. So the hand ignition crew, they pick it up and they start dragging fire, and they get maybe a chain, and instantly they get some torching, spit some spots out into this country. Well, in this country, it's a little, the fuels are a lot more receptive. I don't want any spots out here. It's not the oak brush anymore. We're starting to get into some good timber, some mixed con, that kind of thing. So at that point, I'm going, you know what? I'm beating my head against the wall the last 2 days here. I'm pushing my luck. So at that point, I said, you know what? Let's cut it off here. Let's make the decision to let's go direct and just pinch this thing off, hold this, because Saturday they're predicting a red flag warning. So I'm a little nervous about continuing here. So I tell everybody, let's, whoever's in the ignition crew and the holding, let's gather together, start punching hand line, go direct. It's not real popular at that point. That's a big chunk of ground to go direct on in that country, but they're good soldiers. They start picking it up, and that's where they work the rest of the day there. Not a big deal. I'm starting to feel a little more comfortable. I'm like, all right, maybe shouldn't have got into this whole thing, but we can get out now. Nothing wrong. About 9:30, I get a call from the holding specialist over here, and he says the helicopter just tells him we got a spot in a drainage further up the hill to the northeast. So I gather up and head that way, walking, and I get over there. And it's about a half acre in the bottom of drainage. Not a big deal, but they picked it up. But I could see that we've got issues. It's starting to. The fire behavior is a lot better than it was the day before. Let me show you what it looks like in that drainage. This is just this is a photo from a little further down the drainage.
How far was it?
From where the spot fire was? It's maybe 75 yards down the drainage.
No, I mean, how far did it spot?
It's about 200, 300 yards. And it gets real thick, you can't see in here, so helicopter's the only thing to be able to see it. But as you can see, you start getting to these big boulders and big snags and old down logs, and it's really tough. So I go up there and I talk to the dozer operator, and he tells me, hey, you know, we picked up this spot, but if it gets any further to the north and east, I'm not going to be able to do anything for you in there. So I walk over there, and when I get to the other side of this drainage, I notice now there's logging slash probably 3 foot high, thinning slash. It's old lop and scatter stuff, probably 5, 6 years old. Now I'm really worried. So at this point, you know, I'm heavy on engines. I've got a couple of crews. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I should call dispatch, see if there's any other crews around. Well, what time of year is this? It's October. There's nothing around. But I call, and there's a state crew out of down by Tucson somewhere, and then there's another Type 2 crew to the north and west that just happened to be on. And so I just had dispatch call and ask for availability. At that point, I was like, we need to get out here and look and see what's beyond this little portion. So about that time, I get with who my trainer was, as well as we had predetermined an IC for the day in case we had something go bad. We had an IC in place, give him some resources, and he could handle the fire portion. So the plan was to go take a recon with one of the helicopters. This is about 11:30. Get out to the road, get in the truck, start driving towards the heli base, and we get maybe 100 yards down the road, and they call and say, hey, we got a spot on the other side of the drainage. It's about a 1/4 acre. So the hand crew gets in there. They start trying to get in on the heel of it, put line around it, but the winds are starting to swirl on them, get erratic, and now they're getting a good distance away from the main fire. And the crew boss calls me and says he's worried about it. So my main priority was those folks. So we had them, okay, go ahead and pull off. You know, the flame lengths in that slash were starting to get 10, 12, 15 feet. Nothing those guys were going to do anyways. So we canceled the flight, had them hook the buckets up and start trying to see what they could do with it. Needless to say, they worked at that for 20, 30 minutes, and it was pretty ineffective. So about that time, we started having a conversation with the line officer going, hey, I don't know, we're probably not going to catch this. I think we need to declare it. It had already gone to 5, 10 acres, couldn't get dozers or hand crews in on it. Aviation resources were ineffective. So that 1,300 we declared a wildfire. At that point, my trainer, actually happens to be my boss as well, he took the main escape portion along with the IC that we had predetermined, and I took the rest of the resources and went back and concentrated on buttoning up what we had lit on the prescribed fire end of it. And that was pretty much it for the rest of the day. We worked at trying to secure that. And this is what became of the... So that day, it rolled into... This is the west side of Williams. It starts getting into housing right in here. Actually, our district office sits right here. Yeah. It rolled about 1,000 acres that day right at town. did the complexity analysis right out. They ordered the Type 1 team. I stayed with the rest of the folks. We ended up chinking in the rest of that hand line. Got that finished by about 2000 that night. Pulled everybody off, and we all went into the suppression side of the organization of trying to figure out where to go and what to do with this thing. So that's kind of how all that went down. We had a review team coming. It was be a formal review. It's got to be within the region office within 60 days, right? And it was a national review team. Had some folks out of the WO, a fire staff off of one of the forests there in Region 3, a meteorologist, a fire ecologist, a good array of folks. The process was, like I said earlier, my role, gathering information, everything to present to this team. They came in, we gave them an in-briefing of the layout of everything that we had, where everything was at, give them access to everything. And then they went about the process of going through all of our data, going through all our IQCS stuff, interviewing key players. Expectations. As you can understand, the expectations from me, I was pretty wrecked for those few days. So I'm thinking, hot lamp and cattle prod and that kind of thing. I was pretty taken back with the whole thing, but it really wasn't that way. That team really did a good job of trying to make you feel at ease because they knew you probably felt worse than anybody there. So they really made you feel comfortable. And even during the interview process, that's an intimidating thing to go through. But at that point, it was almost therapeutic to just get the story off your chest. I'd been reliving it for days and days. What came out of that was some contributing factors. It's all in the main report. But and of course, that's the big smoking gun. The exceeding relative humidity parameters in the prescription. But like I said earlier, we knew, we read the predicted RHs and we went for it. We were getting conflicting weather readings from two different places. What you're seeing on the ground is not reacting like 8% humidity until you launch a column on it. But that's the big one, and we knew it. We knew it ahead of time. When I handed them the stuff, here's what you're going to see. Here's what you're going to find. No need to dig. The wind direction switch. In my mind, this was the biggest, the single most contributing factor that contributed to this. Without the wind switch, even if we'd got some spots, it would have spotted out into country that just wasn't receptive to fire. Fuel type difference inside and outside the planned unit. Remember what I talked about was two planning units joining together. I knew what was in my planning unit. I didn't know what was in the one adjacent. And it looks like that. As you can see, it's just nothing but, and all these fuels at 9% humidity, it's all receptive. It all goes off well. As you can see, this is a thinning area that they lopped and scattered. We don't do this anymore. Everything's piled now. We pile it and burn it. Definitely a big fuels problem in here. And it's still, part of it's still there. We haven't burned it yet. We're gonna. It's just a mess. Their recommendations, compliance with policy and direction. Do you guys know where I got outside of policy at?
Maybe didn't request a variance. The humidity was going to go lower than what your burn was.
Yeah, do I need to cut it off at that point? Once it got dipped below 12?
If you got a variance.
Yeah. What do I need to do? Call the line officer and document it, right? And I didn't do either one of those things. She knew late, she was actually on the burn, and she was listening to the weather, but We didn't have a conversation of, hey, we're outside the RH. She knew what the RHs were, but we didn't have that conversation, and I didn't document it.
Did I understand you say you were the trainee burn boss?
Mm-hmm.
So where was the burn boss?
He was there. Yeah, he was there. You know, if you look at the complexity of this thing, it's the location that makes it a Type 1. So it was no different than all the other Type 2s that I've done. So we really ran it that way. He was the trainer on paper. I was calling all the shots. So because it was, in our mind, it was really, you know, putting fire on the ground was more of a Type 2. Just the location made it a Type 1. But no, he played a key role, and I'm telling you more of the story about how it went through my eyes. But I did get outside of policy and direction on that. And that's, I looking that line officer in the face after the fact was a big deal to me. I was embarrassed because it's, you know, basic burn boss 101 stuff that I didn't do. Burn plan development, they didn't, they reviewed the burn plan and they thought it was too complex. It was complex because it was a Type 1 burn, but it's somewhat programmatic. It stretches over, you know, the plan itself stretches over 12, 13,000 acres. You run into a lot of different things along the edge of that mountain that changes, and so they didn't like that aspect of it. We are in the process right now of rewriting it. It's actually going to get broken up into 2 different burn plans. But pre-burn prep, the unit itself was prepped, but was I prepared to burn? Looking back, I don't think I was, just because I didn't know what was out to the northeast. How far out do you look? I knew the road. I only knew it looked the same one side of the road or the other. But what happens when you get out 200, 300, 400 yards? What's out there? I didn't know. I didn't know what was in that planning unit. I didn't know those piles were there. Prescription parameters. It's an obvious one. Stay within the prescription parameters. Shooting for such a small window, thinking we're going to get it done, get out before we fall out of prescription. Is that good planning? Probably not. Staff integration. Here was another one. What they're talking about there is, did timber let fire know that that slash and those piles were in there? Well, as a matter of fact, they did. They did. But it was 5, 6 years ago, and us in fire, we forgot about it. We forgot about that slash. We forgot about those piles. It wasn't a staff integration issue. It was a district fire issue. In the lessons learned portion, increasing our long-term situational awareness. And what I mean by that is are we really thinking, you know, I know we look at the weather 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 days out, whatever. But are we looking at everything else that far out? What's a half mile out in front of your burn? You know, I think a lot of times we pick a unit and we roll out there and we get to burning it. It's in the here and the now. What happens if we do get a slop and we're out here all night? How are we going to hold it the next day when these folks have to be off? Mandatory time off, that kind of thing. Those are the things I wasn't thinking